it's Jim. I'm happy to be here as I've just started this channel, and I've had a pretty good time so far. I've had some pretty awesome feedback through comments, PMs, emails, etc., from voice acting techniques to game production queries. I'm eager to provide any answers and insights that may help inform you or inspire you to join the industry. So let's not waste any more time. Here's 5 questions that I've picked from the list that have been submitted. Okay, our first question comes from a user Sinful Synth Syntax 77. Geez, first username right off the bat. For a guy who overpronunciates S's, it's not great. I've been doing voices for D&D characters for years, but I only have a few that I reuse all the time. Can you go over your process and how you voice different types of characters? Do you have different styles for heroes and villains? Yeah, for D&D characters, I experiment with accents, tones, and mannerisms to differentiate them between each other. Heroes, I generally have more confident, clear voices, while villains may be deeper or more menacing. For D&D and live voice acting, mannerisms are almost more important than the voice itself. Find something that your NPC does and do it. If they twirl their mustache, twirl your mustache. If you cross your arms, scratch your neck, do something visibly to indicate the character change. It goes a long way. And people often overlook the same thing when recording a voice. There are different things that your voice does when you move. For example, if your character is throwing a ball while speaking, you should mime throwing a ball. That movement will definitely come out in your voice. Our next question comes from user Illa Danielle. It's pretty cool. It's like a play on Illidan and the name Danielle. I love it. Fantastic. Have you done any voice acting professionally? Is there anywhere we might recognize you? Oh man, I doubt it, but maybe. I've never really credited myself properly on any titles that I've had direct creative control over. I did a lot of commercials and modeling when I was younger, and some voice acting on a bunch of Newgrounds projects back in the early 2000s. And like I said, on a bunch of different games that I've had creative control over. You might recognize me credited as Tierfing, as James Banbury, as Jim Banbury, Jim Ryan, Joss Ranger, Jim Rynor, or a few different Newgrounds handles, but I'm really not going to get into that. All right, here's one from XXX_BiteTheBard_XXX. Man, the XXX underscore thing, that's giving me like Scene Kid flashbacks. Seems like an AIM username. Okay, I've been trying to break into the game industry for years with little success. How did you do it? And what advice do you have for aspiring voice actors or game developers? Perfect question. This is the question that really made me want to do the Q&A to begin with. Helping people get into the voice acting and game industry is really my number one goal, not only as a producer, but in general. The key is persistence and networking. I started off just making games for fun. My first real professional gig was as a customer service game master. And then I moved up to kind of an associate producer, a production assistant kind of role pretty quickly after that, taking on more and more responsibilities until eventually someone recognizes like this, you're really put in the love and care and passion into the project that people are looking for. In the game industry, you're going to be faced with a pretty challenging decision as to whether or not you want to continue to be a developer, continue to be an artist, and create, or if you want to be a producer and oversee a team. You're going to need the skills of an artist regardless. So if you want to be a producer for the art team, you have to have some knowledge of art. You have to know what you're looking at. You have to know what to expect. You have to know what your team is capable of and what is expected of them. Same with programmers, pretty much any production role. So the best way to get into it is to start as an artist, as a developer, and then make the decision that you don't want to do the art anymore. You want to oversee and manage the art, which for some people is challenging. What leads to so many people staying as artists for their entire careers, which is fantastic. If you have the talent to be an artist, I say go for it. I personally am not a very skilled artist. I became a producer pretty quick because I like to be involved, but I'm not necessarily good with a Wacom tablet anymore. And connect with industry professionals. They're always really open and eager to help, eager to talk to you. Go on LinkedIn, pull up producers on games that you like, pull up artists who have created art that you like, and connect with them, because the game industry is pretty small, pretty close-knit, and making friends with people in the industry is probably the best way to get into the industry. Here's a question from Anonymous. They ask that their username not be revealed. How important is it for a voice actor to understand the context of the game and the character they're portraying? And do you have any favorite characters that you voiced? If so, what makes them special to you? I think understanding the context is pretty vital. Really knowing your character, where they're coming from, what kind of general mannerisms and tone that they set in the story really enhances the authenticity of the voice and the role that you're picking. Your favorite characters often hold significance due to their depth and impact, either to the story or to you personally. I can say that a couple of my favorite characters that I've ever voice acted were Sephiroth, which I was very pleased with because I'm a huge fan of Sephiroth and Cloud Strife and Final Fantasy in general. Apart from that, I really liked voicing Bilbo Baggins.
I think my Bilbo Baggins voice is pretty good.
Done a lot of Warcraft characters. If you look around my channel, I think the Grom Hellscream voice is probably the most successful one I've done before. And that's just one I've been practicing to annoy my friends since like 2004, so it's been a lot of fun. The D&D characters that I've posted, Arundel Shea, Spoge, those are characters that I've designed and played. My PC characters that became NPCs. Liking a character helps. Liking a character, knowing the character, knowing what they would emphasize and what weight would be put behind their words really helps. Yeah. If you're going to voice a character, learn as much as you can about the character. See how other people have voiced it. And don't necessarily try to copy their voice, but maybe try to use them as a reference point to kind of influence how you carry the character. All right. Finally, the last question comes from my_chemical_explorer. What's with all the emo kid usernames? Is that a thing again? All right. He asks, so you say you're a game producer? What games have you worked on, and in what capacity? We'll get ready for a bit of a longer answer. Back in my Newgrounds days, I worked on about a dozen games and cartoons as a VA, an animator, and a background painter. This was back in the early 2000s. It was just a hobby at the time. I worked with some people who have since become quite popular, but I'm not going to name them as I don't want to ride their coattails for some garbage work I did back in high school. So while I've never worked for Blizzard in any official capacity, I worked with Warcraft 3 custom map editing pretty extensively. I was part of a team called Dark Tempest, which we produced a bunch of really great melee maps, really great custom maps. I did a lot of voiceovers for custom characters and a ton of modeling and texturing and particle effects. This all happened years ago, way before Warcraft 3 Reforged came out. I don't have the skills to work on models and textures that are that high quality. I'm not that good of an artist. I started working for Gravity Interactive in 2012 as a part-timer, but quickly took on some more projects. My handle was Tierfing. I did online events, forum discussions, live streams, and content creation mostly. While working for Gravity, I worked on Ragnarok Online Valkyrie Uprising. It was my first professional job in the industry. I worked as a game master and associate publishing producer on this mobile title, running events, nothing terribly big. Up next was my work on Metal Assault / Gigaslave. I took on full publishing production role for this game. It was like a multiplayer PvP version of Metal Slug. It was a pretty fun game. After the developers went out of business, I became the de facto content producer as well and created in-game content and events for the next about year and a half until our contract expired and we lost the rights to the game. I also worked on Requiem, Memento Mori, Rise of the Reaver, and Desiderium Mortis. I worked as a production assistant. I was also involved with the quest writing and world building as part of the lore team. I also worked on Ragnarok Online 2 as a production assistant and briefly as senior producer. I only ran the project for a few months while we transitioned our teams. I later brought on a new art and development team and a producer to take over for me. My involvement with the project was pretty limited in scope, mostly a kind of keep things running until we have a budget again sort of thing. I worked also on Rose Online. I oversaw, unfortunately, the closure of this title. Our company was pretty beset with technical issues and problems with our old hardware. Rose was one of our best games, but sadly, since it was not an original IP, it just didn't get the love and attention that it deserved. One of my final acts as a producer for Rose was to create a kit and document plans for Gravity to work with a private server. I no longer work with Gravity, but it looks like my plan was put into place, and they have officially partnered with that private server to relaunch the game in an official capacity, and I couldn't be happier for them. The main bulk of my work was for a game called Dragon Saga. In 2013, I started working on Dragon Saga Galaxia, and I worked as a game master and production assistant. I fell in love with the side-scrolling Street Fighter kind of controls for this MMO, and the next 8 years of my life would be dedicated to this title predominantly. Dragon Saga Arcadia expansions 1 through 3, I was an associate producer for 1, producer for 2, and the senior producer for 3. It was kind of the highlight of my career at Gravity. I loved every moment being studio head for this title, working with artists, game designers, level designers, programmers, GMs, community managers. To bring the game to life was an extremely fulfilling and fun. I also voiced the narrator in a kind of so-so imitation of the original narrator from 2010. I worked on the Dragon Saga Evolved expansion, which was a huge overhaul of the game mechanics and the stat squish, making room for future expansions. I also included a ton of quality of life improvements based on feedback we've gathered over the years. I also voiced several of the NPCs that previously had no English voice lines. Dragon Saga Cryos Origins was the last expansion that I was involved with as senior producer overseeing the project. Much of the content creation, quests, and design of the expansion was done by me, though not all. This was a pretty small expansion, much smaller than the others at this point. I was doing much of the art in-house, and voicing Cryos was a lot of fun. Doing dragon voices is always a kick, but I don't think any of those voice lines actually made it into the game. I think they were just used for promotional purposes. At this point, I left Gravity and joined Microsoft's Turn 10 Studios working on Horizon Motorsport 2023. During my time there, I oversaw the car art team, as well as some members of character, environment, UX, UI, and other art teams. My involvement was pretty limited, and I left the project shortly before it launched. And that was really my most recent gig. I am attached to the Age of Mythology remaster, Age of Mythology Retold, though the degree of my overall involvement in the project is still kind of up in the air. So that's pretty much it as far as my major involvement in the game industry goes. I've worked on a number of smaller titles in a much more limited capacity, but that was really the big list of the titles that I've had a significant impact on. Well, that does it for this round of questions. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for sending me the questions. If you have any other questions that you'd like me to answer, my contact info will be in the description below.
Goodbye to all of you out there still listening.